You know that feeling, right? It usually hits you around 3 in the morning.
Oh, absolutely. You wake up and the house is just completely quiet.
Exactly. And your brain just decides, seemingly out of nowhere, to introduce one of the most deeply ingrained human anxieties. What happens when I get old?
Right. And specifically, what happens if I grow old completely alone? Like without any support structure or anyone to care for me when my body or, my mind inevitably starts to decline.
It is just this massive survival fear, and it really transcends geography and culture.
Hmm.
So today, our mission for this deep dive is to explore a highly radical proposed solution to this millennium-old problem.
Yeah. And we have a really fascinating text to guide us today.
We do. We are examining a manifesto-style document from 2010. It was written by Shuo Weng, and it's titled The Humanitarian Strategy of the Second Home, Now New Oasis for Life, The Care for the Old.
Quite a title.
It is, yeah. It outlines the elder care philosophy of a community created by a group called Lifechanyuan.
Which is super interesting because, throughout human history, societies have experimented with endless ways to solve the logistical and emotional problem of elder care.
Right. I mean, we've built monasteries, state-run nursing homes, multi-generational households.
Exactly, and complex government pension programs. But this specific text claims to offer a permanent structural solution. It basically proposes a system that entirely breaks the traditional dependency on the biological family unit.
Because the author essentially argues that our current models are built on a fundamentally flawed premise, right?
Yes, exactly. If we look at the core of that flawed premise, the text points out that the primary driver of human anxiety around aging isn't just the fear of failing physical health.
Okay, then what is it?
It's the specific, isolating fear of having literally no one to handle your daily care. Or, eventually dealing with the logistics of your funeral affairs.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for centuries, human beings have placed their core hope on a very specific insurance policy to mitigate this fear.
Right, raising children.
Raising children. You invest in children with this unspoken, and I mean sometimes completely unconscious, expectation that eventually they will invest their time and resources in taking care of you.
But the text views that reliance on biological children as a highly fragile system.
Yeah.
When you look at the mechanics of it, putting the entire burden of elder care on the shoulders of offspring creates immense vulnerability for both generations.
So what does this all mean? Well, I like to think of relying solely on biological children for elder care, like building a massive, heavy structure on a single narrow pillar instead of a wide foundation.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Because if that one pillar cracks, say your child faces their own severe financial ruin, or they move to another continent for work or whatever, the whole thing just falls apart.
Or there's simply a total estrangement in the relationship.
Exactly. The entire structure of your old age completely collapses because there is no backup system.
Well, the author of the manifesto uses a highly vivid sensory metaphor for this exact vulnerability. Relying on children, or even on fragmented social relief programs, is described as being like scratching an itch from outside the boot.
Scratching an itch from outside the boot. That evokes such a specific, frustrating feeling.
Right, it really does.
You know, the itch is there, you're going through the physical motions of trying to relieve it, but there's this thick layer of leather between your hand and the actual problem. You're getting zero actual relief.
Precisely. The root cause goes entirely untreated. I mean, biological children can be unreliable for completely understandable reasons. They have their own overwhelming modern lives, career stresses, and, their own kids to support.
They are completely squeezed in the middle.
Yeah, and on the flip side, state care or bureaucratic social relief inevitably misses the nuances of human dignity. People just fall through the cracks of underfunded systems.
And the text argues that this unscratchable itch, this core anxiety, doesn't just stay isolated in the mind of the elderly person, right? It radiates outward.
Exactly. It breeds intense family conflicts over the burden of care, ugly inheritance drama, and leaves the younger generation in a perpetual state of chronic worry and guilt.
So the text frames elder care not merely as a private family burden, but as a collective societal failure that demands a unified solution.
Right. So if the core issue is that single pillar of biological family cracking, the text argues we need a solution on a much grander scale.
Yes, and the author actually quotes a famous proverb to set this up. The sea of suffering is boundless, but you can find the shore if you turn back your head.
Meaning the solution has always existed, provided we are willing to completely abandon our current perspective and look in the opposite direction.
Right, and the author goes to extraordinary lengths to align this specific mission of solving elder care with the ultimate goals of major historical and spiritual figures.
Yeah, the text explicitly names Jesus Christ, Buddha Sakyamuni, the Prophet Muhammad, Marx, Lenin, and Mao Zedong.
Which is quite the list. What's fascinating here is how their author deliberately clusters these incredibly distinct religious figures and political leaders together.
Right, framing them under the shared umbrella of great men and sages whose overarching life pursuits were solving human tribulations and seeking collective happiness.
And the text insists we have to actively implement this solution now. We can't just pass it to the next generation. So in the context of this manifesto, the fear of aging and dying alone is identified as the foundational root of human greed and selfishness.
Really, the foundational root.
Yeah. Think about it from a behavioral perspective. Why do people hoard massive amounts of wealth well beyond what they can spend? Why do families tear each other apart in court over inheritances?
Or why parents sometimes manipulate or emotionally blackmail their kids.
Exactly. According to this philosophy, all of these destructive behaviors are driven by the terrifying, deep-seated insecurity of old age. We accumulate capital and enforce familial loyalty as a desperate defense mechanism against dying alone and helpless.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the argument is that we are treating the symptoms, like greed and hoarding, when the actual disease is the terror of helpless aging.
Yes, exactly. The author argues that if you can solve that specific insecurity comprehensively and permanently, you dismantle the psychological need to hoard and manipulate. You theoretically eliminate a huge portion of human suffering.
Achieving the collective happiness those historical figures were aiming for. Okay, let's unpack this. If solving elder care is the key to human happiness, let's look at how the manifesto proposes we actually cure the disease. What does this utopian solution actually look like in practice?
Right, so we move from the philosophical to the physical reality of the second home.
Yeah, how does this community actually function economically and socially to remove that terror?
Well, the creation of the second home by Lifechanyuan places elder care at the absolute center of its existence. It's a core humanitarian strategy.
And to understand how it works, you really have to understand what Lifechanyuan is.
Right, it basically translates to a community or conceptual space where members strive for a highly aligned, utopian lifestyle. Private ownership of property is essentially dissolved in favor of collective resources.
And the text gives some specific stats from when it was written in 2010. The community had 9 permanent residents over the age of 60 and 2 over 70.
Yeah, and within the community structure, these elders are referred to respectfully as Chanyuan celestials.
Which denotes members who have reached a certain philosophical standing and integration into the community's way of life.
Exactly. And the baseline operational rule of this community is that all physiological needs are perfectly and unconditionally met.
So food, clothing, shelter, transportation, and healthcare are all provided by the collective. There's zero elder abuse.
Because resources are pooled, the individual elder does not need a personal retirement fund. The community farms and works together, and the yield of that collective effort guarantees the survival of the elderly.
But you know, the psychological isolation of modern nursing homes is just as damaging as physical neglect. How does the second home address the social aspect?
This is where they completely diverge from modern Western models.
Yeah.
We tend to institutionalize our elderly, right? We segregate them by age.
Yeah, we put them in facilities exclusively with other aging, often declining individuals.
Right, but the second home completely rejects age segregation. The care here is deeply spiritual and social, not just material. Elders live intergenerationally, sharing spaces and meals with youth and children.
Which completely removes that profound isolation and loneliness that frequently accelerates cognitive decline in traditional old age. They are kept inside the daily hum and friction of life, rather than being sidelined.
Exactly. And the ultimate goal for these elders isn't just to comfortably pass the time until they die. The community heavily emphasizes spiritual cultivation.
Yeah, there is a specific quote in the text that really stands out. One will not regret for dying in the afternoon if he or she has understood Tao in the morning.
Right, and Tao in this context refers to the fundamental nature and flow of the universe. The concept means that the true purpose of their final years is to seek ultimate philosophical truth.
It's about reaching a state of profound spiritual peace and understanding that entirely neutralizes the fear of death.
Okay, but let's pause here. By taking away the anxiety of survival and the fear of burdening their kids, does the text suggest these elders just kick back and relax?
You would think so, right? That's the logical assumption based on how we view labor in the outside world.
Yeah, I mean, if survival is entirely guaranteed unconditionally, My instinct is that human nature strongly leans toward laziness. If they don't have to work, do they just sit in a garden and ponder the universe all day?
It's a fair question, but the text describes a profound psychological shift that happens when survival anxiety is completely removed.
So they don't default to passivity.
Not at all. The practice in the second home claims to prove that elders are not a burden. In fact, they become the mainstay, the operational pillars of the community.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text describes them working incredibly hard, from dawn to dusk.
Yes, engaging in agricultural work, maintenance, cooking, childcare. They work silently, making massive, unselfish contributions of labor and wisdom without complaining about being tired or feeling exploited.
And the author makes an incredibly bold sociological observation here. Quote, "There may be lazy young people, but there have been no lazy old people."
Which completely disrupts our standard economic theories about human motivation. If we look at the psychology behind this, we have to ask why people work.
Right, in traditional society, labor is almost entirely tied to survival. You work to earn money to avoid starvation and homelessness.
And that type of forced labor is draining, stressful, and breeds resentment. When an elderly person in the outside world needs care, they often feel like a drain on their children's resources, which breeds immense guilt and a feeling of uselessness.
It's the paradox of voluntary labor. The moment you tell someone they absolutely do not have to work to earn their basic human right to exist, their relationship to labor fundamentally transforms.
Exactly. Their work goes from being a stressful obligation to a joyful, purposeful contribution. They work harder because the labor is an expression of gratitude and community identity rather than a desperate grasp for a paycheck.
Right, because when survival anxiety is eradicated, human beings still possess a fundamental need to be useful, to contribute, and to hold value within their tribe.
So for the elders in the second home, their work becomes their self-actualization. Because they have the most life experience and the least anxiety about the future, they have the mental bandwidth to become the most vital, stabilizing part of the collective machinery.
And this leads to the ultimate societal vision the text outlines. The author claims that once someone becomes a permanent resident of this community, the ancient fraught chain of biological dependency is finally broken.
The young no longer depend on their parents for a financial inheritance or a head start in life because the community provides for them.
And conversely, the old no longer depend on their biological children for survival, care, or validation. The text describes the community as becoming a fairyland for all ages, precisely because the transactional nature of family relationships is dissolved.
It forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question about the nature of family, something for you, the listener, to really chew on.
Oh, was it?
If a community completely severs the financial and logistical obligations between parents and children, meaning you never, ever have to provide physical care or financial support for your aging parents, and your kids never have to bear the burden of caring for you, how does that change the emotional nature of the parent-child bond?
Right.
Does removing that heavy duty of care make the love between generations purer because it is based entirely on choice rather than obligation? Or does entirely outsourcing that care to a collective risk creating a profound emotional distance, losing the deep bonding that often comes from the friction and sacrifice of taking care of someone you love?
Wow, that is heavy.
Yeah.
Does the struggle of caretaking build the bond, or does it merely build silent resentment? It challenges you to look at your own family dynamics right now. How much of your connection to your family is built on genuine, unconditional love, and how much is secretly built on a subtle, mutual insurance policy for the future?
Exactly. It's a lot to process.
It really is. The next time you wake up at 3 in the morning wondering what will happen when you grow old, consider that the solution might not be trying to force the people around you to be stronger pillars. The solution might require rethinking the architecture of how we live entirely. Keep questioning the structures around you. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.